You are listening to Waffle, the bite-sized podcast with Paul Jenkins. First broadcast on Rossendale Radio on the 24th of January 2021. This week, Paul talks to Kevin Hutson, writer for stage, screen and television. He talks about going back to his poetry roots and working with the likes of Carol Ann Duffy.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the weekend wind down, and it's time for the Waffle Hour, where, as you know, each week we speak to somebody who works with words, and we've spoken to everybody from playwrights to poets to theatre directors to publishers last week. But today we're speaking to somebody who has a CV as long as your arm, quite frankly. He's written for television, most notably some very small show called Coronation Street. He's written for well-known comedians. He's published poets, and in 2018 he was the Laureate's Choice Poet, and we'll delve into that in a little bit more detail. He does workshops for schools with the Prince's Trust, and he now, as well as being poet in residence at the Square Chapel Theatre in West Yorkshire, he now lives in Halifax, and he joins me this afternoon. Keith Hutson, good afternoon.
Hello, Paul. You've done your research. Yeah, well, that's brilliant.
I every now and again I prepare for this show. It's few and far between. I'm
not prepared for it.
There you go. It's nice when the presenter knows you better than yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yeah. It could make you a bit paranoid, actually, couldn't it? But yes, it's quite a good feeling on balance.
Oh, it's lovely of you to join us this afternoon, Keith. And we're going to try and unpack some of all of that. I mean, I squeezed it into maybe 20 seconds there, but I'm really hoping you're going to give us some of the details on some of these things. Now, first off, let's clear out. You are over in Halifax, so you're across the border there.
I'm across the border, yeah. Born and bred in Manchester. Mm-hmm. Moved to Halifax about 10 years ago, so I'm an incomer. And I still can't... I still have difficulty understanding some of the words. I'm getting there. Yeah.
Well, look, having lived here for 15 years now in the valley, and I came up from not round these parts. I'm worse. I'm a southerner. So,
right. Heavens. Yes, right.
I was once told by somebody in Ramsbottom that you're not local unless you've lived here at least 50 years. So I got quite a way to go. Now, your writing career has spanned the decades as well. You've been writing for a long time, and what I love is that your work, it appears that you've gone for a sort of transition of changing styles and the sort of things that you write for. I mentioned very at the top there that you'd written for Coronation Street and well-known. Do you want to talk about some of that work?
Yes, of course, yes. Yeah, that was back in the Stone Age.
You do it with chisels? Is that on a bit of...
I was a young man in my early to mid 20s, and I got taken. I wrote a Channel 4 sitcom called First Nights, which never got on because the video company that was going to make it in Manchester went bust.
Oh,
no! So it was sort of like, but it was a good experience because I was taken on to be part of the writing team of this sitcom by a writer called Leslie Darben, who he was a very established writer. I never met him, but we talked a lot over the phone. And he'd written The Avengers and a show called Randall and Hopkirk Deceased.
My goodness gracious me, yes I do.
Yeah, very successful 60s show. He'd been script editor for Bergerac, starring John Nettles, who went on to perhaps more dubious fame in Midsummer Murders. But yeah, Leslie, and he'd also written a couple of West End hits as well. Who Goes Bare and Two and Two Make Sex, which was one of them. I don't know which one. Was a vehicle for Morecambe and Wise, apparently. Anyway, Leslie had seen some of my... Well, I was sending stuff off all over the place, and some of it on Leslie's desk, and he liked it, and I became part of a script writing team for this sitcom. And it was full of the great and the good, and then me. I mean, there was Dennis Spooner, who was an old Avengers writer as well. There was the guy who did Boys from the Black stuff, and very. I've forgotten his name. What was it? What's his name?
Alan Bleasdale.
Yes, Alan Bleasdale. That's right.
I was going to say. So it sounds like you cut your cloth in amongst some fairly well-established writers.
Well, there was Colin Welland as well, who wrote Chariots of Fire, and it was a terrifying but good experience for me. And I've been writing since leaving school. Really, I went to a secondary modern school, and I had an Outpost Publications poetry pamphlet published when I was 20, and coincidentally, Carol Ann Duffy had her first pamphlet published by Outpost as well. We have since discovered, chatting to each other.
We will definitely get onto the world of Carol Ann Duffy in probably in the second part of our interview, I should imagine. Yeah,
but anyway, so this thing fell through. It wasn't the fault of the script or anything. It was just the way it happened, and it was just life. But Leslie said, "Why don't I apply to write for Coronation Street?" So I did, I'd got myself an agent, Roger Hancock, who was the late, great Tony's brother. Tony was, of course, dead by then.
Yeah.
But because I had this agent, I got an interview at Coronation Street with Bill Podmore, who was the producer at the time. And they gave me a trial script, and they liked that. And so, I did some scripts and storylines for Corrie for a while.
It must be quite
a long-term writer, but it was great experience. Yeah.
It must be quite intimidating, because we've spoken to a couple of actors who've worked on Corrie over the sort of the time of doing the interviews here, and they've said that the moment that you are part of that team, you're suddenly very aware of the history behind it, and you're tapping into something that's almost it's part of the nation's psyche, isn't it? Do you feel a sense of responsibility when you're working on a project like that?
Yeah, it was a bit overwhelming, particularly as I was so young. I mean, I remember I went to my first story conference, and they have this big table which they all sit round in one of the rooms there at Granada, and there was a chair in the corner, and I went to sit in that because everybody was so much older than me, and I didn't kind of feel as though I was worthy of sitting at the table. And Mervyn Watson, who was I think Bill Podmore was the executive producer, Mervyn Watson was the producer. He said, "No, Keith, come and join us at the table." "Oh, right, thank you." Yeah, so, I did. But yes, I was very aware. I mean, Corrie, I used to pretend I liked to watch it as a kid because it enabled me, it gave me permission from my parents to stay up for half an hour later,
of course.
I mean, I remember when I was very young, it being black and white, and the Inner Sharples and Annie Walker. Annie Walker was still in it when I was writing for it, actually. But it was it is an institution. Maybe in those days it was even more of an institution.
Yeah, of course.
I say that.
Yeah, we're in only 3 channels in those days.
There were only 3 channels. I mean, it was only on twice a week in those days, and so the story conferences were once every 6 weeks. But I say perhaps it was more of an institution then because it was a very, very character-led drama then, with a lot of light northern comedy in it. I mean, Betjeman called it a latter-day Pickwick Papers, and I think perhaps it's still distinctive, but I don't think it is as distinctive as it was then. And of course, there was very little competition. It's
almost chalk and cheese looking at the show that's running sort of almost continuously now, and like you say, it was the main source of drama for people sort of during the week. Right now, we're going to have to crack on, Keith, just because you've got some brilliant music choices for us this afternoon. We always asked our guests to pick the playlist for us, and you've got kicking us off with a bit of Creedence. Where did you?
I am. Yeah.
Why have you chosen this track?
I love it. Simple as that. Creedence Clearwater Revival. I got an LP. I bought an LP again years ago, called Cosmos Factory. And that got me into Creedence, and my sister, who was 18 months older than me, was already into them. And I think they just came along, said what they wanted to say, and got out. But John Fogerty, I think, was an incredible songwriter, and I just loved the basic, but at the same time quite sophisticated rock that they churned out. And Bad Moon Rising is just a great song.
It's a brilliant tune. Here it comes.
Dedicated to the Rossendale Valley, this is your very own Rossendale Radio.
Welcome back to the Weekend Wind Down. It's Paul Jenkins here with the Waffle Hour. My guest this afternoon is Keith Hutson, and we've been talking about Corrie in the first instance and TV writing and an amazing array of writers you've had the experience of working with. But I'm looking as well at your turn to poetry, particularly in the last few years. You've had pamphlets published, and we mentioned earlier on that your work with the poet laureate herself in 2018, Carol Ann Duffy. Do you want to talk us through your sort of the world of your poetry, Keith?
Well, it was a return to poetry, really, because I had a pamphlet published by Outpost in 1978, and then I kind of got kidnapped by stage writing and TV and things like that, and writing for comedians.
It was the bright lights. They lured you in, didn't they?
Well, yeah, but sort of definitely not. Very sort of, it would be considered in the poetry community somewhat lowbrow, I think, but I don't care. I had an opportunity to do an MA at MMU, Manchester Metropolitan University, where Carol Ann is the director of the writing school, an MA in poetry. I just did it for the hell of it, really. I mean, I've never stopped reading poetry and really never stopped writing it, but I started to send work off, as do all poets, to journals and competitions and things a few years ago, and did quite well. And so I decided to do this MA out of interest, really, pure interest. But Carol Ann was great with me. She liked my work, and I still tour with her now. Obviously not in COVID times, but we've become great friends. In fact, she was my support act when I launched Baldwin's Catholic Geese, the Blood Act book, at the Square Chapel, and I read with her. Queen Elizabeth Hall, South Bank, the British Library, Ledbury Festival, all over the place. She at the Edinburgh Festival. She just keeps inviting me to read with her, and we've become great friends.
I tell you what, though, that's quite a thing, and it's interesting you say about reading with her, because having seen Carol Ann Duffy a couple of times, actually once at MMU, it was a kind of a celebration of some of the writers on the writing course there, the MA course you were talking about. She's very much of or she said then that she's very much of the opinion, I wrote this and therefore I will read it to you. She doesn't perform. It's not big. It's not outlandish with gestures and facial expressions. She reads her poetry to you. Is that something that you took from her? Is that your style? Oh, I've just lost you for a sec there, Keith. Keith, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and call you back in a second. We're just going to, what we'll do is we'll just go to Keith's second music choice now, and I'll see if we can get him back on the line, and we'll retry the line for you. And what we'll do is we're going to play a little bit of, he's gone for a little bit of a classical connection, and this is, for the early evening, we've gone for morning. This is Grieg, Edvard Grieg with Morning.
Like us on Facebook.
Facebook.com/Rossendale Radio.
And follow us on Twitter @Rossendale Radio.
Proud to be your local radio station. 104.7 Rossendale Radio, Lancashire.
There you go. That was a contrast, wasn't it? That we had technical difficulties, and then we went straight into Grieg's Morning. And my goodness gracious me, what a great choice, Keith. We've managed to get you back.
Yes.
Well,
yes,
just as we've done things backwards, why? I mean, it's a beautiful piece of music, but why did you choose Morning?
Because when I was a child, we had a gramophone, but my parents had very few LPs, and one of them was Grieg's Peer Gynt Suite, and I just liked it. I used to play it a lot with that, and my dad had a record called The Legion's Last Patrol, which was an instrumental orchestral tune, and he was in Africa in the war, and I think it reminded him of those days. And there was the Glenn Miller soundtrack as well, and so those three records were played continually by me. And I'd like to say that it fostered in me a great appreciation and knowledge of classical music. It didn't, but I still like it.
Oh, yeah, and yesterday afternoon when you sent your music choices through, I had a very chilled out afternoon. I found a very nice video online of this particular thing, and somebody just setting a lot of sunrises to it. I'm just watching,
great.
and it was the most chilled out 5 minutes I think I had yesterday. It was lovely.
Yeah, good. Well, we all need one of those at least once a week. Yeah.
Now, we were in the midst of talking about Carol Ann, your work with Carol Ann Duffy, and particularly about performance style, and then the gremlins got into the phone system. So tell us about that sort of experience of your performance style, how you deliver things.
Well, Carol Ann and I are very different in that, yes, she is quietly commanding, and somebody once said about her that she attracts attention without seeking it. She's got a great presence on stage. I tend to be a bit more noisy than that. I'm not a performance poet. Please don't think that. Not that I have anything against performance poets, but I read and memorise a script, and throw in a lot of what might appear to be ad-libs, but they aren't. And I'm more sort of bouncy and jokey than Carol Ann, although a lot of the poems that I do read, they might be quite funny, but they've also got quite a dark side as well, because a lot of these people led very unhappy, short lives. But yeah, we're very different, and I think she likes that kind of counterbalance. But she's been very, very good to me, and we have become great friends, and she said that the tours will continue once COVID's out of the way, which is great to hear. And she recommended me to Blood Axe, and we've become great pals. She's marvellous, and a great ambassador for poetry. And
if that's it, you're referring to Blood Axe Books, who are your publishers, and I was having a browse through as well. Some of the writers that you're alongside here even is Bernardine Evaristo, who of course won the Booker Prize just last year. Sorry, it's 2 years ago now. It's kind of like I skipped over 2020 now. It's not in existence anymore.
Well, could be the best thing to do.
Probably the best way to go about it. But you really are sort of in the A-list we are talking about of British writing, which is absolutely wonderful. I don't suppose you've got any of your work to be able to share with us this afternoon?
Yeah, I've picked one out. There's a lot of sonnets in the collection. I'm a big sonnet fan, and the collection is full, really, of poems about some famous, some obscure, some long forgotten, some fondly remembered performers from the music hall days to the present day, really. I mean, people like the Bryn Pew Sponge Dancers, what the hell did they?
My goodness, that sounds amazing. The Bryn Pew Sponge Dancers.
Yeah, Macaulay's Leaping Infants, Willie Netter's Singing Jockeys, I mean, they're all in this book. But there was one guy called William Paul. Now, William Paul was born in 1820, and he was stinking rich. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, if you like, but he had absolutely nothing to do, William Paul. He needed a hobby. And this is what he did. And when I first read this poem in Halifax is mentioned in the poem, a local historian, the sort, never knowingly interesting.
Of course.
He booed it. But yeah, this is about William Paul, and it's called Bad Impresario. William Paul, with millions to waste on battling boredom, wondered which place in Blighty had the least discerning taste. Could he unearth a town where utter tripe would be considered culture at its height? Silk purses, not sow's ears, night after night? 24 hardened scouts were sent to scour the land. 500 flops auditioned for his troupe. The 10 most woeful went on tour, including long-abandoned novelties like Lady Clockeye, Baldwin's Catholic Geese, The Human Mop, Frank and his Dancing Teeth. From Cumbria to Cornwall, no one asked them back, except the Palace, Halifax.
Wonderful.
And it's true.
All of these things. I want to meet the Human Mop.
The Human Mop, yeah. Well, he was a young lad who developed the ability to to hold himself very stiff and erect while his parents tipped him upside down and ducked his head in the bucket. So
the long winter nights must just fly by, as they say.
Well, yeah, there was no Shelley then, was there? So
it sounds like this kind of very slightly bizarre, macabre world you've discovered in sort, because we think of music hall, obviously we think of the kind of very famous acts, and interesting, we were talking about the circus and performers a little while ago, but it really does sound like there was the idea of an oddity was a real thing in the music hall, wasn't it? That kind of like, and you've found a rich vein to write about, which is wonderful.
There were a lot of people in the music hall, and in the early days of Variety, who could do the same eccentric act all year, travelling the country, and never change it throughout the whole lifetime. There was a guy, Georgie Doonan, who used to kick his own bottom in time to a drum beat, and he made a living out of that all his life.
Get him on TikTok. Yeah. That's the answer. We need to do that again.
Yes. The music hall wasn't a freak show, but it was akin to it in that, first of all, the audience were, it wasn't a polite audience in a music hall. And that tradition carried on into, the likes of Glasgow Empire, where Eric Morecambe was once asked on a quiz show, where did Napoleon die? And he said the Glasgow Empire. It was a bear pit atmosphere. When I say a freak show, I'm not being politically incorrect there. That's what they used to call,
indeed,
these places. But the music hall wasn't that. But it was full of very, very eccentric acts. Some of them absolutely brilliant, and some of them utter rubbish. The audiences didn't really mind, as long as there was enough to drink.
Exactly. It's one of those things about rowdy audiences that quite frankly, and also in those days it was, it didn't matter if you got a bad review in the local press because you were already on to the next town. So you're
on to the next town. Yeah. I mean, Little Titch was an incredible performer, in his big boots, doing his big boots dance that were as long as he was tall. And Nijinsky called him a genius. And so there were people like that, and people like Georgie Doonan, who kicked his own backside in time to a drum beat, are all sharing the same bill,
It sounds absolutely fantastic, Keith, and you've captured this within your poetry. Whereabouts do we head if we want to get hold of some of your work?
Well, the best place to head is to Blood Axe Books. Their website will have Baldwin's Catholic Geese ready and available. It's also in Waterstones and quite a few bookshops as well. But probably the best place to go is Blood Axe website.
We spoke to a publisher last week, and they said, as much as possible, head straight for the publishers, because it means that the publishers will get a bigger cut, and as will the artists.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
go to Blood Axe.
Head to Blood Axe Books, and it's very easy to find. Keith is listed under the authors there, as I mentioned, in fine company. Plans for 2021, Keith? Are you still writing? Have you got something in the pipeline?
Yeah, I've got 2 more manuscripts that will come out at some stage. The book won a prize in 2020, but all the readings were postponed till 2021 because of the pandemic. So there won't be anything coming out in 2021. But the next thing I'm probably bringing out is a collection called Illuminati, which is poetry about everyone who switched on Blackpool lights. So someone's got to write it, That'll be
quite a list down the years, I should imagine.
Yeah.
A lot of very dodgy DJs, I should imagine, as well.
Quite a few, yes, and a racehorse and a Spitfire.
Wouldn't be surprised if
ambassador.
Mr. Blobby's probably in there somewhere.
No, he's not. Thank goodness. No,
that would be an interview. Keith, it's been lovely to talk to you this afternoon. We've got one more music choice to come, and you've gone for I Can See Clearly Now, Johnny Nash.
Yes, I have. Yes, because it's a song that if it comes on the radio, I'll always keep driving until it's finished. It's not a particularly profound song, although the lyrics are quite profound if you take notice of them. I think that we all have dog days. I've had a few in my time, and gone are the dark clouds that had me down, and here's the rainbow I've been waiting for. Particularly in this time, everybody is looking forward to a bit of brightness, and I just love the music. I love the musicality of it. It makes me want to tap my feet, and it makes me want to sing along.
What a beautiful sentiment to finish on. Keith Hutson, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Hopefully we'll speak to you again very soon. May even get you in the studio when things allow for it.
That'd be great, Paul. Thanks very much indeed for having me on the show.
Okay, here's Johnny Nash.
104.7 Rossendale Radio.
All done. We come to the end of another Waffle the Bite-Sized podcast, and my guest today, Keith Hutson, was absolutely fantastic. The way that he's turned his career from poetry to TV script writing and then back to poetry again, and some of the people he's worked with across the years, it's just absolutely fantastic. I was particularly enthralled by the way he was talking about his work with Carol Ann Duffy, having experienced her work live as well. It's lovely to hear that relationship on stage that they've got together, and hopefully that they'll be doing some stuff in the near future as we head into 2021. Now, just want to say thank you as ever to everybody who's involved with Waffle the Bite-Sized podcast, our friends at Rossendale Radio for allowing us to broadcast on a Sunday afternoon, and of course to Melanie Kemp for all of her work producing and editing the podcast for you each week. We'll be back with another great guest next week.